Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's true crime video. I'm so happy we can meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the day-to-day, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the murder of 58-year-old Susan Lee Hutson at the hands of her own daughter, 19-year-old Rachel Hutson. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us, one of us, one of us. Now, before we get into the details of today's case, I first need to say a big thank you to Dossier for partnering with me on today's video. It's partners like Dossier that make it possible for me to put out videos as consistently as I do. And if you've been here a while, you probably are familiar with Dossier, but if you're not, don't you worry. You're about to get familiar with Dossier. Dossier is a perfume company that creates luxury scents, but at a fraction of the luxury price point, where most luxury perfumes can cost anywhere from $50 to hundreds of dollars, which, first of all, how dare they? Dossier's perfumes range anywhere from $29 to $49, and they offer bulk deals with up to 25% off and also free shipping when you get three or more bottles, which is a deal that sounds too good to be true. I know it, I hear it, I'm like, but I know for a fact it's true. Like, this is real life. I'm telling you the truth right now. So I have 2 scents to share with you today. One I've gotten before and one that is new to me, maybe new to you. I'm very excited to talk about it because, okay, listen, this is Citrus Marine. And this is inspired by Dolce & Gabbana's Light Blue for Men. And listen, this to me, okay, wait. This smells like a hot dude. Like, I don't know how to describe it any differently. This, if this isn't a unisex scent, it says it's for men. Like, Light Blue for Men. I don't know if Dossier markets it that way as well, but this could very, very easily be unisex. Like, I picture a hot guy wearing this, but I also picture this like lingering on me after I've hugged a hot guy and me liking it enough to go out and get it myself. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. The other scent I have is Musky Green Tea, which is inspired by the scent Creed's Silver Mountain Water. And this is, again, one that is more of like a unisex scent. This was like the vibes I was in this month. I don't know what to tell you. And this one, like the name implies, is very musky. It is very, again, kind of masculine is the best way I would describe it. Like what you think of when you think of masculine. Oh, and it smells so good. This is actually my brother-in-law's favorite scent. My sister gets this one for my brother-in-law and she loves it on him. She's like, hey, you got any more of that musky green tea? All the time. She steals it from me constantly, which is why I have to keep getting more, because my whole family comes to my house and they're like, I love Dossier. And I'm like, I know, me too. And they're like, give me your supply. And I'm like, no. And then I notice something's gone when they leave. And this is one of the ones that often gets stolen from me. Which, I mean, really is just a testament to how good they smell if people are literally like, I'm going to rob you blind. No crimes were committed here, but you know what I mean. Now, if that description of their wonderful smells is not an endorsement enough for you, which I think it would be when you're buying perfumes, you just want to like smell really good, I've got other great news. Dossier is a cruelty-free fragrance company, and that's incredibly important to me because most perfume companies just simply are not, especially luxury perfume companies. If you look into them, most of them are not cruelty-free, and it's very important to me to shop from companies that are. So if that's important to you, if you love perfume and you also just love animals, this could be a perfect fit for you. And then there's the whole, you know, these being a fraction of the luxury price point anyway, which is also like a huge selling point. They smell good, they're inexpensive, and they're nice to animals. Like, what's better than that? Nothing. Anyways, Dossier is offering members of the Brat Pack 10% off of their entire order with the code Bratterstein at checkout today. The code is only good for a limited time, so you might want to get on it while it's hot, but I don't think you're going to find a better deal out there with my code 10% off. They're already super affordable. You could you could get like a bulk deal. You could get free shipping. It's just, I don't think you're going to find a better deal. That's all I'm going to say. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do because you are an adult and you can make your own choices, but like, I know a good deal when I see one, and I'm telling you about it now. So if all of that sounds as good to you as it does to me, don't forget to click the link in my description box to let them know that I'm the one that sent you, because it helps out this channel, and use the code Bratterstein so that you can get 10% off your new favorite perfume, candle, anything they have to offer today. And now I just want to say a big thank you to Dossier for partnering with me on today's video, and a big thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock. Don't ever change. All right, now that I'm done spreading the good word of Dossier, we can go ahead and get into this video. Now, this video is on a case that was recommended to me by a member of the Brat Pack named Bex. Hi, Bex. Thank you, Bex. And Bex actually tagged me in a TikTok where they were kind of talking about this case, like a 1-minute TikTok. And it's a case that I had never heard of before. Oh, also, if you're not following me on TikTok, you should, because you can also tag me in things if you see things that you want me to talk about. But anyway, she tags me, I watch it, I see the 1-minute video, and I'm like, that's very interesting. And then I realized that not a lot of people have covered this case, and I was kind of surprised because I found it to be so interesting. And then I realized while researching it that there isn't like a ton of information out there, or at least you have to kind of dig to find what there is. And I have done that, and I read all the things, and now I want to tell you the entire story. So that's what I'm gonna do, because I read all the things so you do not have to. And at the end of this video, I want you to answer the question of the day. I'm gonna give it to you now so you have it kicking around in your brain as we go through all the details, but of course I want you to answer once you have something to go on. But the question of the day is this: do you believe that Rachel should be in jail or in some sort of mental health facility? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below after we go through the details of this case. And now with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the murder of 58-year-old Susan Lee Hutson at the hands of her own daughter, 19-year-old Rachel Hutson. Our story today begins with a 911 call. This call was coming in at about 4 a.m. on November 29th, 2013, which was actually Black Friday. And the man on the line who was calling to police told the dispatcher that he was calling to report that his wife had been murdered. Police rushed to the home on the 600 block of Osborne Avenue in Indian River, which is a neighborhood in Chesapeake, Virginia. And they entered the home to find a brutal scene. In the kitchen, they found that there was a shotgun propped up against the refrigerator. And as they looked through the bedrooms of the home, they found that in one of the bedrooms, 58-year-old Susan Lee Hutson had been shot to death. She was laying in her bed in a pool of her own blood, and the person responsible was her own daughter, 19-year-old Rachel Lee Hutson. Now, how did we get here? That's really hard to say because there really isn't a ton of information on this family that's been made public. Obviously, if you've been here, you know I like to go deep into backstories. That's what I'm into. I like to talk about how people go on to do the things that they do, right? I like to talk about the backstory to see if there was any warning signs that could explain how we got to where we are now. And also, I like to talk about victims. I like to tell their story of their lives and not just their deaths. But in this situation, there really isn't a lot of information that was made public, but everything that was out there, as much as I could, I found, right? That's good. That's a good sentence. I went out, I scoured the internet, I found out everything I could, and now I want to tell you today so that we can sort of have an idea about who we're talking about. Have an idea about who we're talking about here. This is already going well in terms of me being able to speak well. Anyways, let's start with Susan. Susan Lee was one of 3 kids. Her sister, and her brother were born to parents Helen and Charles, and she was born on May 1st, 1955 in Defiance, Ohio. Prior to her death, she was a former member of the board of Birds Clubs of Virginia, which I'm not exactly sure what that is, but as far as fun, she loved birds, which I mean, bird club, that makes sense, right? And on top of that, she loved reading, and she really liked being outdoors. She liked camping, she liked fishing, she liked nature, she liked all of that jazz. She moved to Virginia in the late 70s, and this is where she met her husband. And this is somebody named either Donald or Rick. I know it seems like that should be clear, but in reportings and even in like interviews, he's referred to as both, which he's referred to in interviews more as Donald. But when I was looking at like the obituaries online where people are leaving messages for the family, he was being called Rick. So I don't know if one of these names is a middle name or what, but I'll probably go back and forth calling him Donald or Rick depending on what my brain decides to do in that particular sentence. But her and her husband ended up getting married, I believe, in 1985. And then they went on to have 2 children. They were both girls. And this was Sarah and then Rachel Lee Hutson, who was given the same middle name, but with a different spelling as her mother. Like John Coffey. John Coffey, like the drink. Just not spelled the same. Now, Rachel. Rachel was 19 years old at the time that she murdered her mother, but prior to that, she had been like a normal kid. She attended and graduated from Indian River High School just the year before she was arrested for this crime. And even though she was 19, she was still living at home. I think I've said this before, but it feels like kids stay home longer because kids stay young longer. Stay younger longer. If you know what I mean, you'll know what I mean. But she was still living at home with her mother, her father, and I believe her sister had moved out of the house and then had moved back in for a time. But either way, her sister was there at this point in time, and it might have just been for the holidays if she wasn't actually still living there, because this murder took place over the Thanksgiving weekend of 2013. Now, growing up, Rachel was super close with her father. Her father even referred to her as his best friend, but the relationship she had with her mother was just a little bit like more tense. And it's not to say that they didn't like each other, that they had a bad relationship, because nothing in their history, other than the fact that Rachel murdered her, would lead you to believe that. But there was a little bit of tension because Rachel's mother, Susan, was incredibly sick. Susan was suffering from diabetes, kidney failure, and congestive heart failure at the time that she was killed, and she had been suffering with her health for years, like from the age of 9. Like Rachel was 9 years old. She was one of her mother's main caretakers because she was there. Her mother was sick, her father had to work, and her sister had moved out for a time. So once Rachel graduated, she was the one that was there for all of it all the time. And she said that she had to sit there and sort of like watch her mom die before her eyes. She said that she had witnessed her mom have several heart attacks. Like over the years, she would witness this, which sounds incredibly traumatizing. And she got to the point where she didn't want to leave the house. Well, she wanted to leave the house and then she didn't want to leave the house. So if friends would, call her, because she did have friends, and be like, oh, do you want to hang out? Do you want to go to the mall or something? She would turn them down because she would feel like if she was to leave the house, she would feel super worried about what was happening back at home, that she couldn't really enjoy herself because she'd be worrying about her mother the entire time and worried about what could happen while she wasn't there to take care of her. Rachel has said that she feels like the fact that her mom was sick sort of stole her childhood and made it so she missed out on a lot of things. And the situation was really stressful for her. It was really stressful for their whole family because it just sort of felt like a waiting game. Like, as sad as it sounds, they would go through the thoughts of like, what day are we going to wake up that she doesn't? And Rachel even admitted that there were a lot of times that she would wish that would happen, that she would wake up and just find her mother dead so that she wouldn't have to deal with this waiting game anymore. Now, of course, they thought this, but they didn't say this to Susan because that would be absolutely terrible. Though Rachel did admit that she had said this to her mother on one occasion when she was mad. She had admitted to her that she hoped that she would die so that she would not have to worry about waiting for her to die anymore. But she said that as soon as she said this, she felt terrible. Like, she felt terrible immediately afterwards because she didn't want to hurt her mom. She didn't want to hurt her mother's feelings, which that sort of bridges us to Thanksgiving of 2013. Apparently the night of Thanksgiving was totally normal. Nothing happened that night that would make anybody think anything bad was going to happen. Everything went according to plan. It was totally normal until it wasn't. So the family spent Thanksgiving together and then sort of went their separate ways. Susan was in her bed, and I don't know if she ever came out of the room and did the Thanksgiving thing like at the table, or if they like brought food to her in bed, because I know she was in such bad health. But either way, she was in bed at this point. And Rachel, her father, her sister, they were all up, but they weren't really hanging out with each other. They were kind of doing their own things. Rachel had been in her bedroom and she was in there for a while. And at around 1 a.m., her father called her to him, like, Rachel, please come to me. So she comes and he's like, what are you still doing up? Because it was like 1 a.m. And she said that she was up and she'd been messing around on her computer. And it was at this point that an argument broke out between the two of them. Now, this was because Rachel wasn't supposed to really be on her computer. She had sort of been grounded from it because Rachel was an adult and she was still living at home. So she had certain, rules put on her if she wanted to live in their house. And she had been sort of having a bad attitude and failing to like clean her room and pick up the house in general. And that was her job. If she was living in the house, she needed to contribute to the household since, she didn't have an actual job. Her father wasn't home. He had been at work, and I guess they were also going through some financial trouble. So her job, if she was going to be in the house and not getting a job, an actual job, like an out-of-the-house job, was to take care of the house, take care of the housework, take care of her mother, and she wasn't doing it and having a bad attitude. And now, on top of that, she was like flat out disobeying them and getting on the computer when she wasn't supposed to. Now, this was no new argument for Rachel and her family, and if you have ever been a teenager, I'm assuming most of us have, this might sound familiar. At least it sounds familiar to me. It sounds like an argument me and my mom had all the time, especially over the computer, because I was low-key, high-key, a little bit of an asshole. And me and my mom are way better now, but when we lived together and when I was like in that teenage to early adult age before I moved out, I was not very nice, and me and her would fight quite a bit. But anyways, this was like an ongoing argument. They would argue, things would get heated, they would make up, and now here they were arguing again. And this was particularly frustrating for Rachel because they'd been arguing so much recently that they actually like had a family meeting of sorts, sat down and decided that they were going to try to stop arguing as much. They wanted to stop being so stressful. They wanted to stop always being at each other's throats so that things could get better and everyone could feel less tense all the time. And now here they were arguing again. So to her, it seemed like this was never going to actually happen. Now, it was after this fight that Rachel started having some real rough thoughts. She said that she had this overwhelming feeling of not wanting to be there anymore, and she started thinking about taking her own life. It was shortly after this argument that Rachel's father and sister actually left the house to go Black Friday shopping. Her dad was pissed. The argument had really made him mad, and he thought leaving the house and going and doing a little shopping might calm him down. So him and Sarah left, which left Rachel and her mother in the home late at night alone. Now, I feel like everyone's pretty familiar with what Black Friday shopping is, but I do realize that I have people who watch me from like all over the world, and maybe you don't. And just in case that's the case, basically Black Friday is the day after Thanksgiving, and it's when like every single store has massive sales. It used to just be on that Friday, but now they're, it's extended to like weeks long and Cyber Mondays and things like that. But basically, people would leave their house like butt ass early in the morning, like in the middle of the night, essentially after midnight on Thursday, go and wait in these long lines and go fight for electronics and shit. It was miserable. But in case you're wondering like why her father's leaving to go shopping at 1 o'clock in the morning, because that seems super weird, it's not. It's super normal. I've only done it one time and I hated every second of it. But that's why, her father and sister were leaving at 1 o'clock in the morning to go shopping. So Rachel is sitting there, right? She's stewing in her anger and her depression, and she's really thinking to herself, like, nothing is ever going to change and nothing is ever going to get better. She felt like she'd be in a constant state of stress and that there was no way out. So she sat down and she made a plan. About 20 minutes after her father left the house, she decided she was going to go to her room. She was going to go to her closet. She was going to get a shotgun and she was going to take her own life. And apparently this was a shotgun that nobody in her family even knew that she had. Which is crazy, but because she had like a gun safe in her closet, but they say that they had no idea this gun even existed. So she sat down and she wrote a suicide note that she intended to leave for her mother, her father, and her sister. And in this, she, said sorry and gave them instructions on what she wanted done with her possessions and her pets. She then put the note in the hallway and then went into her room, went into the closet, got the gun out of the gun safe, and sat down and loaded this shotgun. She said that it didn't feel real at all. She said she knew she was doing it, but she felt very disconnected to the act she was doing, and she just felt totally numb. She has said that she truly believes she was insane at the time that this happened, and that she wasn't in any way connected to reality. She thought to herself that she was a bad daughter, that she wasn't doing enough with her life, she wasn't doing enough for her household, and she just didn't want to live anymore, and thought that her whole family would be better off without her. She said as she sat there, she just kept thinking to herself over and over, this is just going to be over. This is just going to be over. But then all of a sudden, another thought entered her mind. She said she sat there for a long time with the loaded gun, just thinking to herself. And that's when she started to think, like, who is going to find me? She realized that if she did this while her father was away, it was going to be her mother who found her. Because yes, her mother spent most of the time in bed, but her mother wasn't asleep at this moment. Her mother was awake. And if she had heard a shotgun blast and then, yelled out like, what's going on, got no response, she would get out of bed, she would go and investigate, and she would end up finding her daughter had killed herself. And she said of this thought, quote, I started thinking that by killing myself, I'd be killing her anyway. I really felt like my family would have been better without us. She added that she felt like she was nothing and that nobody needed her. Nobody needed her or her mother. And she thought to herself, like, my mother's dying anyway, so why put her through the trauma of losing one of her kids? It was at this point that Rachel took the loaded shotgun and she walked into her mother's room. And her mother was actually expecting her because she had been calling out to her daughter. She had been awake. She had heard the argument. She knew that Rachel was probably upset because of the fight she had had with her dad, so she had been calling her to come into her room. And now here she was walking in with a shotgun. And Rachel says she doesn't think that her mother was scared at all to see her walking in with this gun, which I have a hard time believing that anyone would not be scared seeing their child walk in with a loaded shotgun. But she said that her mom kind of looked at her and scoffed, like, great, this is one more thing I have to deal with, one more thing that's gone wrong. She says all her mom really said to her was like, oh man, wait till you see like how much trouble you're going to be in when your father gets home. And she said that she doesn't believe that her mom thought she was being serious. She thought she was being dramatic and wanted attention. So it was at this moment that Susan took her eyes off her daughter to start looking for her cell phone to call her husband and tell him what Rachel was doing. And it was at this moment that Rachel walked towards her mother, said, I'm sorry, but this has to happen, and then fired the shotgun. And she said specifically of this moment, quote, I shot her. I don't think she realized what had happened. I couldn't hear anything. It made my ears ring. I could tell she was dead. She wasn't moving. I told her I was sorry. I just kept saying I was sorry. She said that she knew she was going to be sorry before she even pulled the trigger, but she just didn't know exactly how bad it was going to be. She said she never went up to her mother. She never touched her mother and tried to, confirm that she was gone. She said that she could just tell visually that her mother was dead. It was later determined by autopsy that what Rachel was saying happened was true because Susan's cause of death was a single shotgun blast to the chest at close range, and she would have died pretty much instantly. After she killed her mother, she left her mother's room fully intending to still take her own life. This is what she says. She says that she walked out of the room and she knew that her mother being gone didn't make anything better for her, that she still had some rough years ahead of her, and that nothing was going to change, so she was going to go through with it. But as all these thoughts were running through her mind, she said she started to worry that her suicide note wasn't good enough, that it didn't adequately explain why she had done what she did, and that she was worried for her father. She was worried that he'd come home, he'd find both of them dead, he may blame himself, and that there would still be a gun in the house, so she was worried what he may do. And she said of this quote, "I was scared that my dad was going to come home and I was going to be dead and my mom was going to be dead. There would still be a gun in the house and I was scared he was going to do something to himself, so I called him." So at this moment, her father, Rick/Donald, was out shopping at Walmart with his daughter Sarah doing their Black Friday shopping when all of a sudden his cell phone rang. So when he picked up this call, it was his daughter Rachel, and he could have no way of preparing himself for the information he was about to hear, because she told him that she had murdered her mother, his wife. And when he heard this information, he didn't believe her. He thought that she was just trying to piss him off because they had been fighting, so he actually hung up on her and then tried to call his wife. And Rachel must have heard this ringing because she actually went into her mother's room, and this was the first time she had went back in the room since killing her mother. And she says she went back in the room where her mother's body was. And it was at this moment that she knew it was real. She said she went into shock. She could not believe she had done what she did. But she went in that room and she retrieved her mother's phone and she answered her mom's phone. Her dad was irritated to have her be the one who answered the phone and just kept saying over and over, like, put mom on the phone, put mom on the phone. And Rachel kept saying, like, I can't, she's dead. I can't imagine being this man. It's so horrifying. But she said of this moment, quote, "I just kept telling him that she was dead. He still didn't believe me, and I wanted him to believe me because every second of reality was unbearable, and I really wanted to hurry up and be gone. It's like every second it was getting worse." So her father hung up on her again, and it was at this moment that she was like, okay, I will make him believe me. So she took a phone, and I don't know if it was her cell phone or her mother's cell phone, but either way, she took one of the cell phones and she opened up the camera and she took a photo of her mother's dead body. And the photo was graphic enough to make it very obvious that this was real, and she texted this photo to her father. So just picture her dad at Walmart, Black Friday shopping, fighting with his daughter, getting this information, not really believing it's real, but being like, oh, like, what if it is? And then he opens his phone and he sees this photo. And he said it was at this moment that he was like, okay, this is probably real. But he didn't want to believe that it was. He was trying to do anything he could to, like, protect his mind and convince himself that it wasn't. He's like, maybe it's a bad joke. Maybe it's, like, Photoshop. Like, anything but this being my existence right now. So her father called her back and was like, oh my God, how could you do this? How could you do this? And she just said over and over how sorry she was. And it was during this phone call that she told him, like, don't worry, I'm going to end my own life. You're not going to have to deal with me anymore. I'm not going to be here. And he begged her not to. And she chose to listen to him. She said that she chose to listen to him because she knew she had already hurt him, that she had already hurt her family so badly, and that her father told her, like, he could not lose them both and begged her not to do it, so she decided not to. She said, like, I know I hurt my family really, really badly, and if I was to do this to myself now, I'd just be hurting them worse. So it's at this point that her father rushes home, and he doesn't call the cops beforehand. He doesn't call the cops on the way. He wants to get there first, and this just goes to show how much he cared about her still, even after learning what she had done, because he wanted to get there and calm her down, because he was worried if he had, like, called on the way, the cops might get there before him, and if they did, his daughter might open the door with a gun and get herself killed, and he did not want that to happen. So he pulls up to the house, and his plan is to, call his daughter, convince her to come outside, and once she came outside, he was going to tackle her and tie her up. He was going to do anything he could to get her restrained and then call the police. But when he got there, he was surprised to find that once he called her to come out, she just walked out. She came out with no resistance, no issue. So it was at this point that Donald/Rick just decided to call the cops and report what happened. And this was about 90 minutes after he had gotten the photo of his dead wife. And he called and he was just like, I need police here now. My daughter has murdered my wife. While waiting for police to arrive, Donald/Rick and Sarah both went into the house and they did see Susan. Her husband was completely shocked, and Sarah, I can't even imagine being in her position to be looking at your mother in that way and knowing she's dead and knowing what she went through. I cannot imagine how hard that would be. But she went in, she stood in the doorway and she just looked at her mother and she said she wanted to go in. She wanted to hold her hand and tell her that everything would be all right, but she could tell that that wasn't going to do any good. So she just went back outside and waited for the cops. So the police arrived and Rachel was, of course, taken into custody. She was handcuffed and she was put in the back of a police car. And her first question to officers was like, is this going to be a long process? Which kind of took the officer like off guard. Like, that's a weird fucking question, but like, yeah, it'll probably take a while. And she just responded with like, well, it's pretty clear what happened. Kind of like, why is this going to take a while? Everyone knows what I did. Let's just be done with this. While she was sitting in the car, she asked if she could speak to her father. She wanted to talk to him and she wanted to let him know what to do with her pet chickens. And so her dad came up and they talked. And while she was sitting in the back of the police car, she looked up at her dad and was just kind of like, do you still love me? And he answered to her like, yes, of course I still love you. And she just simply responded with, sorry. Now, after the crime scene was processed and released to the family, like you can go back in, it was actually Susan's husband who cleaned the scene. I've mentioned this in videos before. It's something that's not talked about a lot, but after a violent crime like this, if it happens in your home, it is the family's responsibility to have it cleaned up and taken care of, which seems absolutely fucking crazy to me, but I know that that is the way it is. So her husband decided that he would be the one to clean it instead of like hiring a company to do it, because there are companies that specialize in things like that. He said he wanted to be the one who did it. He needed to go in there to see it, to be the person to take care of it so that it could feel real and feel finalized in his head. He said he didn't want to like leave one day and come back and it all be gone like it never happened. Like, this was his wife. It was his job to do this. Now, when the news broke that this murder took place, people were shocked. Like neighbors, people who knew the family, they could not believe that this could happen. They said that across the board, the Hutsons seemed like a happy family, that they were kind of quiet and kept to themselves, but anytime they would see them like out in their yard, they always seemed like they were having a good time, like they were happy to be around each other. Susan was said to be friendly and well-liked amongst the people that she did talk to, and Rachel was said to be, quote, a very likable and amicable kid. One neighbor was like, man, it's just so sad that this happened right after Thanksgiving. And she, or he, I can't remember, I think it was she, is totally right. Because like, it is sad across the board that she was murdered, right? It'll always be sad. But the fact that it happened around the holidays, like her family will forever associate the holidays with this murder. Anytime this time of the year rolls around, this is what they're going to be thinking about. And that's just incredibly sad, because this is supposed to be, you know what I mean? Like, this is the time that they're supposed to enjoy each other. Rachel said that they always really liked the holidays and really liked spending time with each other. And I can't imagine always associating that with the death of your wife, of your mother. It just seems so sad, because that, I don't know about you, but Thanksgiving and Christmas, like that's my favorite time of the year. People would assume it's October because I give off like spooky bitch vibes, right? But, and don't get me wrong, October through December is like my time, but something about Thanksgiving and Christmas really gets me where I live. And now these people are always going to associate that with death. And that is so sad. But anyways, 19-year-old Rachel Lee Hutson was arrested and she was charged with first-degree murder and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Once she was arrested, there was the question of bond. And basically, Rachel's attorney was asking that the judge either send her home on like house arrest, which I wonder if her family would have been down with that sickness, considering I know that they were scared of her. They were scared that this happened, scared that it seemingly came out of nowhere and therefore could seemingly come out of nowhere again. But her attorney was still like, can you send her home on house arrest? Or the other option was like to send her to a psychiatric hospital while awaiting trial. Just anything but jail, basically, is what he was going for. Her attorney said that Rachel needed daily access to professional treatment for a long-term and ongoing mental illness, though he wasn't clear what the mental illness was, and said that her diagnosis was something they were going to try to find out in the near future. They were trying to figure out what exactly was wrong with her, and they wanted to get help for her for this illness that they didn't know what it was yet. Now, when she was initially arrested, she was put on antidepressants, like the jail staff was giving her antidepressants, but eventually she went on to take like 4 different medications for her brain, and it's not clear what those medications are. They weren't listed, but she said that they were effective, and they took her brain from feeling like a tornado, and like her thoughts feeling like a tornado, to just a whirlwind. So her attorney said that they wanted to move this case along. They wanted to get her evaluated. They wanted to figure out what was going on with her, like, as soon as possible. But the defense also asked the judge to not order the evaluation right now because it was a lengthy process and they needed to find a qualified representative to evaluate her. So in the meantime, they were like, we need to find somebody to look into her, but please, can you either send her out on house arrest, can you send her to a mental health facility, or, just give her bail. The prosecution countered this, though, of course, and they were like, you should probably keep her in jail because she is a danger to herself and also to the community. Ultimately, Rachel Hutson was denied bail, and she was going to wait in jail for trial. She wasn't going to go home. She wasn't going to go to a mental health facility. She was going to sit in jail and wait for trial to begin. So, the defense's defense was that Rachel Hutson was responsible, right? She was responsible for what she did to her mother and that she did physically do it. She did physically murder her mother. But they were saying that she shouldn't be legally responsible because she had a long-lengthed, ongoing mental illness that went undiagnosed and untreated for years, and that she was under the burden of caring for her ailing mother, and it just drove her to snap. Rachel later, though, kind of went against this. This is what they did at trial, but this isn't how she claims to actually have felt. She says that she actually didn't really mind taking care of her mother, that she knew her mother was sick, that she knew her mother was in pain, and that her mother and father had taken care of her whole life. So it was just, she felt like it was just her turn. It was her turn to help take care of her mom. She said that she was just really depressed and sad to see her dying and in so much pain. Rachel said that she had struggled on and off with depression for most of her life, but that she never felt like she could do anything about it. She said she knew that her family couldn't afford to get her like mental health care because they were hard up on money. Her mother was dying, right? So there was a lot of medical bills, a lot of expenses going towards that. So she felt like she couldn't really come to them and be like, but I'm feeling a little blue today, boys. Like, she felt like she just kind of had to suck it up and deal with it. But she said she was having trouble doing so and that she had tried to take her life on more than one occasion. She said at one point she had actually put a box cutter into her wrist, but had chickened out and was too afraid to actually go through with dragging it. And she said on another occasion she took a bunch of pain reliever. I can't remember if she said it was Tylenol or Advil, aspirin, one of those, Aleve maybe. She took a bunch of those to try to end her own life as well. And that she said her sister was there and knew it and that she threw it all up. But her father said that he had no idea. He had no idea she was depressed and had no idea she had ever tried to take her own life. Now, there was an issue with this, though, on whether or not it was true that she had been suffering with this for all this time. And that's because Rachel did end up being admitted to Central State Hospital for treatment in the summer of 2014. And the hospital reported that they found, quote, little evidence of psychotic symptoms, end quote. And they also said that Rachel had the ability to control her outbursts of impulsive, aggressive, or destructive behavior when she chose to. They also noted that she understood the charges against her and knew that the outcome of this trial would significantly impact her future. So with this, the judge deemed that she was mentally competent to stand trial. So it's kind of like she may have suffered with all of these things. That could be true, though they couldn't find evidence that this was actually true. At least it wasn't reported. But was it to the extent that she should be not legally responsible for killing her mother? That was really what the question was. So trial preparations began, but in the end, it didn't really end up mattering because Rachel did end up taking a plea deal. Rachel pled guilty to second-degree murder and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. So now she was just to be sentenced. And she asked the judge for mercy, saying that she was taking medication and it was helping her control her emotions and be a more stable person so she could be, quote, normal and have a life. She told the court that she felt that that was something that she never really had a chance for. She didn't feel like she had been given a chance for this to happen because of everything she was going through. Rachel's attorney, the defense, asked the court that Rachel's sentence not exceed 30 years. They said that it shouldn't go above 30 years because Rachel was very, very remorseful for what she did and that she had never tried to hide that she did it. She took full responsibility since day one. Ultimately, Rachel Hutson, who was 21 by the time she was sentenced, was given a sentence of 50 years with a 35-year suspended sentence, which sounds like 15 years. right? But in a lot of the reporting, it says that she got 18 years. And I believe the additional years came due to the firearms charge, which ended up being tried separately earlier on in a separate court, the Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court. And when she went to this hearing for the firearms charge, she was surrounded by her family and her friends. Like, there were a bunch of people there for her. At the time that Rachel was sentenced, her father, her sister, they put out a statement rather, to the public through their attorney when they said, quote, "Rachel's family has continued to support her throughout this. That's meant life itself to Rachel. She's been incarcerated 2 years already, and she wants to make amends for what happened any way that she can." With that, she was taken into custody to begin serving her sentence. Now, she never really talked herself, right? She never really sat down and went through publicly what happened that day, what was going through her mind. And then there wasn't a trial, so we didn't have all those details sort of hashed out publicly at a trial. But then 2 years after she was sentenced, Rachel went on Dr. Phil. So this was going to be the first time that she sat down with somebody in an interview and told her side of the story, what happened from her point of view, her mindset, all that jazz. And this was actually the first thing I watched when I was like, okay, let's see if I want to cover this case. I watched the TikTok and then I watched this Dr. Phil interview. And that's what made me decide that I was going to cover the case in the first place. And something about her interview actually reminded me of another case I covered, which was Zachary Davis, which if you're not familiar with that one, I think it's actually my most viewed video because it's an absolutely crazy case. And they remind me of each other. I'll link it. If I don't remember to link it, just search on my page. You can search Zachary Davis or search Zachary Davis Bratterstein. It will come up. But something about their two interviews reminded me of each other, and it could just be that I'm being influenced by the fact that this was another child murderer who killed his mother and was interviewed by Dr. Phil. But either way, something about their interviews reminded me of each other. During this interview, Rachel's family was present. This was the first time that they were actually together in the same room with no glass between them. Though it's not like they hadn't seen her, because they'd seen her like the whole time. They never cut her off. They would, go and visit her and stayed in contact the whole time. Her sister said, like, I know she did something terrible, but she's my sister and I'm never going to stop loving her. Her father is also very supportive of her and has been supportive of her since day one. He says that he does not believe his daughter should be in jail. Not to say that she shouldn't have to pay consequences for what she did and that she shouldn't be punished, but he believes that she should be in like a mental health facility somewhere and not in jail. He has said that he truly believes she was insane that night. And he says that when he looks at the situation in hindsight, he can see the moment where she sort of left herself. He says that they were having their argument and that he had, taken her computer from her and started to try to put like a password on it to stop her from using it. And that she tried to like pull it away from him and he sort of pushed her back and was like, no, we're not going to do this right now. He said that in that moment he saw her leave. He said that he saw her close her eyes and when she looked up, it wasn't her anymore. There was somebody else there. And her sister sort of confirms this and says that the day of the murder, when her sister was sitting out in the cop car waiting to be taken away, she went over there and talked to her and she seemed so like calm and different and just not like herself at all. And she agrees with her father that her sister needs help, not jail. She says that this was so out of character for her. There was nothing in her past that would show that this would happen. She wasn't violent. She had no problem in school, nothing. But Rachel says that she does deserve to be in jail. She said she deserves to be in jail and deserves every single day that she was sentenced to. She's like, I deserve to be here and to serve my time. She does say that she regrets it though. She says that she regrets it every single day. And she was asked by Dr. Phil, like, if you were in the same situation again, would you still shoot her? Like, what would you have done? And she answered no. She said, I wouldn't have shot her. Like, obviously, I'm not going to, even if she wouldn't have said it. She's like, I wouldn't have shot her. I would have instead called the police, told them I was suicidal, and had them come and pick me up. She said she misses her mother every day, that she thinks about her mother every day, and that she just wants to be better. She said she's going to do better. She doesn't know what she's going to do, but she's going to try to do something with her life once she's able to make up for what she has done. Rachel Hutson has said that she wishes she could go back in time and change what she did, but she can't. And Dr. Phil, who seems to be a religious man, at least based on like what he said to her here, told her like, listen, if there is an afterlife and your mother's watching over you, because he believes that that is what happens, that there's people watching over you, even if something bad like this happens, that they still like watch over the people that they loved. Like, what would you like to say to your mother if she's listening right now? And Rachel said, quote, I'm sorry. I wish I could take it back. And I wish it would have been different. And I didn't want it to be like this at all. And I miss her a lot. And I think about her every day. Now, Rachel's family, though supportive, does seem to be a little bit afraid of her. Like, they said that to them, this came out of completely left field. They had no idea that this would happen, so it's scary for them to think that it could just happen randomly again. Rachel has said that she isn't a danger, that she would never hurt her father or her sister, and Dr. Phil pointed out during this interview to her family that, like, it seems to them that it came out of nowhere, that there were no signs, but that there were signs. Not that she would do something this bad, but that there was like a pending blow up, and that there were signs that they could watch for, and there were also signs that Rachel could watch for to stop herself from ever getting to this place again. Sarah and her father have said that they will one day forgive Rachel for murdering Susan, but that reasonably it's going to take time for them to get there. And Rachel responded to them saying, quote, "You guys being here for me right now is enough." And then after that, with permission from the jail, Rachel and her father, Rachel and her sister were able to hug for the first time since Rachel was arrested for murdering her mother and his wife. And with that, my friends, is the story of the tragic murder of Susan Hutson. I hope you found this to be informative, and I hope my presentation made sense. And of course, I just want to thank you for remembering Susan with me today. And now that I've given you all the information throughout this video, I want to revisit the question of the day, and that was this. Do you believe that Rachel should be in jail, or should she be in a mental health facility getting help for her mental health issues? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, because I feel like it could be kind of divided. Anyways, guys, before you leave, if you haven't already, please don't forget to leave me a case suggestion in the comments below. As I've said, anytime you leave me a suggestion, I add it to my list. I have a long list of cases. And when you leave a suggestion, I put it on the list. I put your name next to it so I can give you a shout out if I cover it, like I did here. I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste. I love looking into the videos that you guys suggest, the cases that you guys suggest. This is a bad outro, but it is what it is. I love looking into the cases that you guys suggest, because they're often cases I haven't heard of, or cases that need more coverage. And I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste, otherwise it would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below for your convenience, along with a link to my membership, where you get early access to non-sponsored videos, priority comment responses, things like that. And now I just want to say one last thank you to Dossier for partnering with me on today's video. It's partners like Dossier that make it possible for me to put out videos as consistently as I do. And a big thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock. Don't ever change. And now with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.